Okay. So the career theme, or the career facts and the job titles, we did pretty good there. What I wanted to share with you, and I'm going to send this out to you later on, but I sat here trying to figure out what is it about keywords that seem to be causing a challenge for a lot of writers, not just those of you that are in this class, but a lot of writers really seem to have a difficult time wrapping their mind around what are we talking about when we're talking about keywords. And, clients, they're really famous for saying, hey, I need a new resume because I heard it doesn't have the buzzwords in it. And the truth is they don't really know what they're talking about either. So when we're talking about keywords, we're not talking about things like demonstrated ability to manage others. That's not a keyword. Or prospect and ability to build relationships. Those are tasks. So if you can see this on my screen, let me see if I can pull this up. And one of my text people, would somebody chat and let me know if you can see a thing on my screen that says keywords? Anybody? I'm going to unmute here for a second. Christina says she sees it. Thank you, Christina. And like I said, I'm going to send this out to you. But this is just kind of a synopsis. Things to keep in mind. Keywords are nouns, noun phrases, abbreviations, and acronyms. Acronyms are biggie for keywords. They're not verbs. They're not long sentences. They're short, either noun phrases, which it could be a couple of keywords, nouns linked together, or a noun or abbreviation. They represent a specific job function, a knowledge, or a capability. And probably, if you look back historically, the feds have been using keywords long before we ever even heard of keyword searches and ATS. And if any of you have ever worked with federal resumes years ago, and, fortunately it went away, but the feds always talked about KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And every federal job announcement specified what knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to be represented in the resume. So if you think of keywords as the same sort of thing, knowledge, skills, abilities, specific job functions. Keywords can be occupational specific. So you think of different occupations where it may be a job function or a knowledge that is specific to that particular occupation or that particular industry. So real estate, not everybody does that. Purchasing, not everybody does that. And then there's general keywords, and a lot of you included the general ones in your homework, but you missed a lot of the occupational. So those would be things like customer service, because everybody on this call does customer service. Everybody on this call does project management, so that's why they're general. Another way to think about keywords is if you were looking for somebody to fill a particular position, what would be the word you'd type into Google to find that person? So the example I gave here is, let's say you're looking for somebody that's going to work on your car. Well, you could type in things like professional, friendly, hardworking, and I saw some of those show up in the homework assignment. But that's not going to tell you much about whether or not you're finding a good auto mechanic. You could type in action words like organizing, planning, delegating, managing, and some of those showed up in the homework assignments. But that doesn't tell you if you found a good mechanic. But if you type in a function or credential or an area of expertise like certified auto mechanic, ASE certified, Mazda, transmission overhaul, oil change, Virginia State inspection. Now you begin to pull up results on Google that you're looking for. So you think when you're developing your keyword list, it's thinking in terms of what words would somebody use to try to find my client and to prove that my client has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job. And to make the keyword even more effective, that's when you build in those action verbs, like the organized, delivered, created. And we're going to look at that a lot as we go through. A great resource, if you don't already have it, it's a little paperback here called Best Keywords for Resumes, Cover Letters, and Interviews. Wendy Annaluo and Louise Kurzmark put this book out quite a few years ago, and my copy has been used so much that all the pages fall out every time I pick it up. And I'm glad to see now they've come out with a second edition. And basically what the Best Keywords does is each chapter is a specific occupation and industry. Each occupation and industry lists common keywords, and then Wendy and Louise give you an example of how to use that keyword in an accomplishment statement. So this may be one of the best investments you make if you haven't already purchased this book. Just go on Amazon, and I don't remember, it's $18.95 or something. But I know that when I was first getting started and writing a lot of resumes, this was my go-to guide. And as I said, I used it until the pages started to fall out. So another exercise I wanted to show you that can help you with this whole keyword thing. And somebody give me a heads up again. Let me know if you can see Candace's profile on the screen. I think I'll try unmuting the line too and see if this works. Okay. Can you all see Candace's profile on the screen?
We'll help you develop a path to success.
Ooh, somebody has a radio on.
Your next step. Learn more at EDCC.
I am really sorry about this, folks. I'm going to mute this again. I don't know who's doing that, but we got to get that to go away. I don't think it's mine.
I apologize. It's me. I'm trying to turn it off. Hold on.
Oh. This is like when they call into NPR or Click and Clack are saying, please mute your line.
50 years of educational excellence.
Okay.
For upcoming events.
Okay. A lot of you said you wanted to get certified. And as I said earlier, you're going to get a profile that you have to write the resume for. And it's going to look like, a lot like Candace's. So what I would recommend that you do is what I did in this exercise here. Get your highlighter out and start going through here and highlighting nouns, noun phrases, and acronyms that represent knowledge, skills, and abilities that Candace has said that she has. So as you glance through this, I know that a lot of you pulled these out. Another thing that's revealing when you do this is you begin to notice, like, here's inventory, and then here's inventory, and then here, down here in the third paragraph, is inventory. That's a good clue to you that that word inventory is going to need to show up in her resume in order for her to have the best shot at the types of positions that she's identified. Actually, it's 3 times in the first paragraph. It shows up again in the third paragraph. Other ones that showed up, and I don't know if I saw this on many of the lists, vendors, vendor contracts, vendor management. We've got things like daily cash, buyback orders, telephone orders, supplies, parts, sales and service, advertising and promotions. Here's inventory again on the second page. So I'm going to send you this, too, so that you'll have this to reflect on, and you can go back and compare it to your list. I'm hoping that if you didn't get this initially, that the more you work with this, the more you'll begin to realize the value of identifying those keywords. Because as we go forward then, we're going to want to focus on these keywords while we're writing the job summaries on the resume. We're going to want to focus on these keywords when we're identifying which accomplishments do we want to present. And again, using that example from today when I was proofreading and editing a resume, the client's last job was selling life insurance and long-term care insurance. His prior job, he was selling software solutions, B2B. He said he wanted to get out of the insurance business. He didn't want to sell life insurance anymore, and he didn't want to sell long-term care insurance. Yet those words were sprinkled throughout the draft that the resume writer wrote for him. And when I brought it to her attention, she said, but he put a lot of those words in the worksheet. That's what I'm saying is we have to sift through what the client is giving us and be able to identify what is the theme they're trying to communicate, what are the words that we need to integrate in order to represent that theme, what are the accomplishments and responsibilities that we want to call out that are using those words that represent that theme. So that is my speech on Candace's homework, and I'm going to try one more time to unmute the line, and hopefully our radio announcement is going to be gone. But I wanted to just run through that and see what questions and comments I had before I pull up tonight's presentation. So let me try.
Excellence. For upcoming events, visit edcc.edu/calendar.
Still don't have it. Does someone know? Do any of you know whose radio that is?
Get help from the.
Can someone claim it?
You know, I thought it was mine, but I've turned mine off. It's not me.
Okay. I don't know who is doing that. It's quiet now. Let me try this. Christina, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any questions or comments about that long speech I just gave?
No questions, but I think there were definitely a lot of helpful nuggets in there. Like I didn't even realize that including some of the general keywords like project management, in addition to the job-specific ones, it's kind of a good thing to do. So that was helpful.
Okay, good. Douglas, how about you?
Yeah, my approach, the way I've done, and maybe I've been doing it wrong all this time, is to try to start with keywords with the job announcement and highlight those, and then see how many I can find, how many of those can fit what my client's background is. So I approached by doing some Googling of the jobs that she was interested in, trying to find some common themes to them, because she's got multiple options or multiple things she's interested in. And then I remember you saying that.
Yeah, you had said that when you sent me the homework, that she does have different options, and it is true that clients may not be focused on one particular occupation, so sometimes it's a matter of capturing everything and then trying to figure out, as you're building the resume, what do I keep going back to? And then that's what you focus on. I usually tell my clients, and this is the truth, I don't know what the resume is going to look like until I'm done. I don't know what it's going to say. I don't know any of that. But it's coming together as I'm working on it. And like Doug said, it is also relevant to look at the job announcements. That's why it's really good to get those from your client up front. When a client says, I'd like you to write my resume, ask them to send you a couple of job announcements. Those announcements aren't even remotely related to each other. Don't try to write the resume. That was one of the points I made last week. Don't try to write a resume if a client wants to be, a customer service manager for an automotive dealership and also be a school teacher, because you can't do it. It's going to make you crazy. So start with what the client's giving you, compare it to the job announcements, and build your list around that. How about you? Tiffany's not on the call, Tiffany Bidding. Ronnie, are you there? Oh, I may have lost Ronnie altogether. That might have been her radio. Okay, how about you, LJ?
I'm all good. I thought the highlighter was just a brilliant, very simple tool to have in hand.
Good. I think that does help a lot when you go, oh, yeah, there they are. So keep that in mind if you do the test. Take the profile and actually highlight the words and start, you can even go through a profile and start crossing off stuff you're not going to use. Just, delete those sentences so that now you're only working with what's important. When I work on a resume, I'll keep my client, I interview my clients and I take notes while I'm interviewing them. And then when I'm working on the resume, I have all those notes up on one screen. And as I use something, I cross it off, my notes. And if I'm not going to use something, I just delete it altogether.
For 50 years,
oh, dear, we have the radio back again.
Okay, it's not me.
And LJ, you're the only one who figured out how to get your photo on there. Thank you. You'll have to give us a lesson. Suzanne, did you get on the call yet? I don't think so. Tiffany Roberts, do you have any questions or comments on all of that?
No, I think this is fantastic. I really like it. So the profile itself, is that part of your interview process? Do you have the client write that? Does that part, where your questions came in that you gave us last week?
Well, no, I don't have the client write it. The reason I gave you the profile is because you won't have the ability to listen to me interview a client. And also because a lot of you want to go on and get certified, you're going to get the profile. So the profile is going to be whatever notes you're taking when you're talking to the client. Now, some resume writers will give their client extensive worksheets. That'll take the place of the profile. In other cases, like with myself, I give my clients those 10 questions that I think I shared with you last week, and then I just get on the phone, and while they're talking, I'm typing frantically.
Right.
And then, but in the end, I basically get a story that's very much like Candace's story. And as I mentioned last week, Candace really was a client of mine. So I just put that profile together based on what I remembered she told me during the interview.
Okay. No, it's helpful because I'm doing a combination as well, questions and then interviewing, and I'm trying to learn how to make that more robust. So thank you.
You're welcome. Brenda, are you on the call yet?
Yes, I am. How are you?
I'm fine. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I was a little concerned that Candace had two objectives. She wanted to look at something in parts and service, but she also was very interested in doing sales. So I kind of broke it out into the three themes that I saw.
Okay. Well, and what you want to think about there, though, Brenda, is are those two so really separate? I don't know if you've ever walked into an auto parts store like Advanced Auto Parts or AutoZone, and there's somebody behind the counter that is not only finding the merchandise that you're in there to buy, but they're doing a needs assessment, which salespeople do. They may be taking you through the store and trying to convince you to buy something else that you didn't really come in for. They may be meeting the vendors that are coming in and demonstrating the new products. So there is definitely a crossover. And in a situation like Candace, what you look at then is how can we help her combine these skills and present herself as being both, the best of both worlds. Okay. But, I know what you mean about breaking it down according to the different occupations, too. But again, think about, can we combine these? Are they really disjointed, or is this part of what makes her unique?
Okay.
Oops, somebody else just added a photo. Love it. Okay, Mark, are you on the call? I can't remember. And Sheila, did you get to join us yet? Okay. All right. So let me see if I can get tonight's presentation up on the screen, and then I'm going to jump into that. And I sent you all a lot of sample resumes. Did everybody get those?
Yep.
So I'm going to, all right, good. because we're gonna look at those while we're talking too. But I can't find mine. Oh, there. As you've all noticed, I can get a little bit wacky when I'm teaching. Okay, so let me see if I can get my PowerPoint up here before I mute the line, and then I'll jump in and we'll start talking, and then I will unmute periodically and see what questions and comments we have. Those of you that came on a little late probably didn't hear the discussion where I can't figure out how to get the whole display to show up on my screen. What are you seeing on the screen right now? Would somebody just give me a... Anybody? Christina? Douglas? What's on the screen?
One primary slide, and to the side it says the next slide.
Okay, yeah. That's because I can't figure out how to get the presentation mode to work. I just hooked up my new computer, and I have two monitors, and apparently they're not cooperating. So bear with me while you're looking at this disjointed screen. Ignore the screen on the right side and look at the bigger one that's here in the middle while I go through this. And if that's not working for you, then you may just want to pull up your own slides. I don't know. I can always figure a workaround. So let me just go ahead. I'm going to mute the line here and jump into this. Okay. Somebody just confirmed that you can hear me before I get too far into this. Just a quick little chat message would be nice. Okay. So, somebody... LJ, you've been my good person. Let me know that you can hear me. Can you send me a message? Somebody sent me a message. Christina? Oh, dear. All right. I'm going to try this again. Okay, I was begging somebody to send me a message. Were you guys hearing me while I was doing that?
Yeah,
yes,
we all messaged.
Yeah, we sending you a message.
Okay, I don't trust technology. I'm going to mute the line again. Hi. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we're just going to look at, the modern resume and how it's changed. And I know when I asked everybody for the baseline resumes, this really kind of gives me a sense of where each person is at in terms of where their current resume skills are, as well as their knowledge about resume format in general. What I have found with this class and with all of mine is that I have a huge range of people that really seem to have a good grasp on today's modern resume, as well as people that are still holding on to some of the old traditions. So I decided I'm going to put this presentation put this module into the presentation so that we can look at what are the differences, and you can begin to identify, am I going in the right direction, or are there a lot of things that I maybe need to discard? So we're going to look at the old versus the new. We're going to look at those essential categories that go in the resume, and then an overview of the optional, so that as we go forward then, we're going to take each of these sections apart and begin developing the resume around that. So the first thing is, just kind of look at why have things changed and what has really changed. A term I heard years ago, and I don't know who to credit, so I like to claim it as my own, is the old resume was a career obituary. It basically gave an outline of, I worked here, and this was my job title, and this is what I did, and then after that I went here. And they were extensive. They covered all the information of the client's experience. There wasn't really any theme. There wasn't, keywords weren't relative. Now the resume is the marketing brochure. So the whole focus of the resume has shifted from talking about what the client did to actually talking about what the client can do and has done and is offering. So the focus went away from the candidate and it went over to the employer. In the past, the resume was used as an application tool. Now it's also the interview agenda. So I mentioned it last week, and you'll hear me say it several times. What we put in the resume, the client needs to feel comfortable talking about in the interview. The old resume was generic, and oh God, it still bothers me when I'll get a call from a client and they obviously think they, are experts in the field, and they'll tell me, well, I just need a generic resume. I even had someone tell me the other day, I needed a generic resume that's 1 page long. That's what I was told I need. It's like, okay, then you don't want to call a professional. So now they're not generic. They're very targeted to industries and positions. And, of course, we all know in the old days you used to mail one. Now you don't. You post it either through an email or an online job board. That changed resumes. Keywords used to be verbs. Maybe that's why a lot of people still struggle, because they used to be supervising, managing, directing. Now they're nouns. Old resumes started out with an objective. Now they start out with headlines and branding statements. Old resumes used to lead with the education, and we still see a lot of resumes coming out of colleges where the top section of the resume, right underneath the client's name and contact information and objective, is the education. And when we're still using that old format, it in many cases I'm seeing situations where it didn't even matter that the education was 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's still at the top of the resume. Now we lead with that professional summary. The old ones were exclusively focused on the job skills, tasks. Matter of fact, back in the early 80s when I first got in the industry and we were teaching resume writing, we used to tell our clients, bring in your job description, copy the information into this format, put your name and address on the top. Now you have a resume. The focus now is all about challenges and accomplishments. Duties and responsibilities can be summarized in a couple sentences. Back then they were very plain. Now it's all about visual appeal, color, graphics, images, tables. It goes on and on. Of course, the old resume, that old adage, it's supposed to be 1 page. Now it's multiple pages. And in reality, when you put it online, pages are irrelevant. And I always tell my clients, if you don't believe me, log into an email message and hit print and wait and see how many sheets of paper print off your computer, or go to a website. So there's no way to tell how many pages, and getting hung up on pages is ridiculous. I remember having a conversation with a client once. He was standing at a Xerox machine, and he was copying each page of his 4-page resume, but he was reducing it to a 25% copy size. Then he was cutting those 4 pages out that were 25%, glued them to a sheet of paper, and was printing out 1-page resumes. So that is probably the extreme of ridiculous. But, keep in mind, the 1 page is totally irrelevant anymore. As I say, the old one was a complete chronology. Now we focus on the highlights. So as we break down the resume, and if you want to, just pull out, Homer Simpson's. I hope you all picked up on my theme there. I do happen to be a good fan of the Simpsons. But Homer's is kind of a basic resume here, entry-level job candidate, some of the basic categories you'll see on this resume. Not a lot of fluff. Starts with the professional letterhead. We'll talk more about the letterhead in future lessons. Then instead of an objective, the career target is there. That could also be the headline on the resume. But the summary, we got a professional profile, professional summary, and then we have his experience section. Those are the essential pieces. When you look at the optional categories on the resume, then think about the inverted pyramid style, where you want to have that most newsworthy, the most important information at the top of the resume, and then you want to work your way down. So as you're organizing your sections, the questions would be, well, what are the most important things? And it kind of goes back to that whole thing, education. Is that the most important thing? If the most essential information is the client's name and how to contact them, is the second most important thing what the client wants? And then the third one, what their education is? Or would it be more this format of who is the client, what do they do, and what's an overview of what they're offering me? And that's how I want you to think about that profile and summary. And then you work your way back, and you include those sections that are relevant to the goal, and you put them in the right order according to how relevant they are to the goal. Try to avoid any of those potential barriers, like job gaps, EEO issues, and, you give some consideration to the resume length. So if we take each of these apart, these essential sections and the optionals, let's look at some of the different things that apply to the education section, some of the things that you want to take into consideration. One is, how relevant is it to the position and how recent? So if the education is highly relevant to the position, it does need to have a higher calling in the resume. But there's some strategies for the way you can do that, and we'll look at that. If it's recent, so maybe the client, maybe they've got 10 years of work experience, but they recently got their MBA, and now they're going to move out of that taxi driving job and move into something else. Well, now the education would take preference over the experience section. So keep that in mind. The type of degree. I'm just giving you a couple of options here. Whether or not you spell it out, you use it with periods. Just make a decision and be consistent. And just a little aside, and some of these tips are the kinds of things we find when we're grading samples and tests. It's not bachelor's with an S. It's not master's with an S. And a good way to think about that, I find anyhow, a little clue that I remember is when you graduate from college, and I think everybody on the call had that experience, you walk across the stage and they hand you this diploma and you turn the tassel on your hat, and you have now been bestowed the title of bachelor or the title of master. Just like when, the knights in shining armor are knighted, they are now a knight. So you are a master or a bachelor. So just kind of keep that in mind, no S on the end of those. You can list the course of study if it's relevant. And here's just a couple of options for doing that. I'm getting distracted by my notes where I told you guys not to look. When you're doing the college, in addition to the degree, you also should identify the college, name, and location. And there's always these tricky situations, and I showed you a couple of examples here. Colleges that have a name change. It's kind of, I go back and forth with this with clients. Sometimes it's the current name of the school that you want to use because that is the one that is most predominantly known in the client's market, in which case you may put the former name in parentheses, like I did here with Hagerstown Community College. On the other hand, it may be more relevant to put the name that actually shows up on the transcript or shows up on the candidate's actual college diploma. So you can make a choice there as to whether or not you want to call out the current name, the former name, or Just go with one name. Another thing that you may take into consideration is whether or not it's a school within a school and how you're going to format that on the resume. GPAs, that's another issue, is are you going to list the GPA? Well, a best practice is if the GPA is 3.5 or higher, you may want to list it. It's not essential that you list it. It really varies from college to college and client to client. How you list it is going to be important. One thing that I think a lot of people aren't aware of is this terminology cum laude, magna cum laude, they are not capitalized. So when you see those capitalized, those are errors. And you can check the Gregg Reference Manual or the dictionary, and you're going to see they are Latin terms that define with honors, with great honor, with highest praise, and they're not capitalized. Whether or not you want to use any of those, it's really up to you and what you think is going to sell the client. And then when it comes to the dates, this is also kind of an industry standard, is you put the date the degree diploma was issued. You don't put the years that the client was attending that college. So it's not the start and end date, it's the year that the diploma was issued. If you want to include the month, you can do that. And a general rule of thumb is if it was within the last 5 years, include the date. If it was older than that, don't. But this is not a hard and fast rule. You've got to be thinking overall strategy, what is going to work best for the client, if I include the date or I don't include the date. If the degree is not completed, there's a couple of ways you can do that, too. I'm showing you some examples here. How many credits did they complete? And that first example, it's kind of explaining, too, why they didn't earn the degree. The advantage of doing this, though, like writing in here, anticipated completion or bachelor's administration completed 90 credits before finding employment, the advantage of putting it in there is it becomes a key word that'll get picked up by an ATS. So, yes, eventually the reader of the resume will recognize that the client doesn't have the degree, but to get it through that initial scan, if the degree is showing up as a key word, it really can help the client. And the other thing is, if they don't have any a degree at all, maybe it's only high school and, higher education is required, don't even create an education section. Just leave it off altogether instead of putting a red flag on it. Other things to consider when it comes to the education, coursework, internships, projects, international travel, study abroad. Or do you want to include those? Where do you want to include them? Definitely if you're working with a current student or a recent grad, they can really add more relevant keywords to the resume. They can add more accomplishments. They can add more meat to the resume. You can work them in under the education section. You can create separate sections. So if you look at Lisa Simpson's resume, this is a one-page resume for a college student. The education is mixed in with the extracurricular experience, but then there is a separate section for all of her study abroad. This is, one option for breaking it out into individual sections. On this next slide, you're going to see how they kind of fall under the degree. So here's the master's degree, and then with this one, I called out the capstone project that the client completed to get that master's, as well as something that the client had published while they were working on the master's. And then below that is the earlier degree. Another kind of general rule of thumb, and again, you've got to think about this strategically, but a general rule is if you have a master's, you don't really need to list the bachelor's unless they're significantly different. It's pretty much a given that if you have a master's degree, that at some point you also earned a bachelor's degree. But, rather than put bachelor's in business administration and then master's in business administration, it would be perfectly acceptable to not include the bachelor's. However, maybe the client wants to include it because of the college they went to or any number of other things. That resume that I was editing and proofreading today, the client was referring to himself as a alumni of Ohio State University, but his degree was from Northwestern University. And when we went back and looked at his worksheets, he attended Ohio State for 4 years, which leads us to believe that at some point he transferred and finished up his final credits. But he really, really, really wanted to list both colleges. So that's why I say there are some general best practices, there's some general rule of thumbs, there's actual rules, and then there's times that we collaboratively make a decision with our client about what's going to work best for them. And then here's just another example of education, breaking out some of the research projects that the client did, breaking out some of the extracurricular activities. So I just wanted to show you a couple of different strategies and styles. As I'm pulling together sample resumes for class, I could probably give you 50 of them, and still I wouldn't even be scraping the surface. So I just want to kind of give you some general ideas of what to look for. Professional development and certifications. Like the education, you want to make a decision. Are they relevant? Are they current? If they are, how do I want to include them? Do I want to combine them with my education section? Do I want to create an entirely new section? And if any of you are thinking in the back of your mind, well, I heard for ATS you can't combine them, we're going to talk about ATS in a future lesson. Right now, if we can just focus primarily on this nicely formatted hard copy resume that is going to be presented to a human being, not a computer. So right now, at this point, if we want to combine, we can combine. If that means later on we have to create another format, we'll do that. But for, general purposes with these initial modules, let's just put the whole ATS thing aside for a little while. If you're going to do certifications, it's a good idea. It'll, at a minimum, include what the certification was for or the training. You might also want to include the training provider or who was the licensing agency that awarded this certificate. Depending on the profession, nurses I know sometimes are asked to put their state license number. Real estate agents may be asked to do that. I did a resume once for a home improvement specialist. We put his license number on there. Maybe it's important to put either when they completed it or when it expired. So maybe if you're putting down, like CPA certified and when it was actually awarded or when it's up for renewal. And here's just some examples of how technical training and credentials were handled on this one resume. This client is, now that I'm looking at it again, he was actually a sleep specialist. He's the guy that, you go in and they do the sleep studies on you. He ran all the machines and ran all the tests. So as you can see, he's got a substantial number of certifications and licenses, and most of them either had an expiration date or they were for a range of dates. So I reflected all of those on the resume. And again, you get your clients to help you because they're really the experts in their industry. So they can provide you with a little bit of insight. Military experience, this is another one that sometimes we have to deal with on a resume. I'm going to show you one in one of our future sessions. We'll talk a little bit more about military, and I have a military sample that I'll show you. I don't think I included one tonight. Again, the first question always is it relevant? Is it current? Does it add value? And then once you've made that decision, where are you going to represent it? So, depending on how old it was, one thing you could do is like a one-liner somewhere in the experience section. So let's say we've got a client that, did serve in the military during, Operation Freedom, and he wants to include that, but that was, 10, 12 years ago? So rather than give it an entire section on the resume, perhaps a one-liner like this would be enough to bring that information to attention in case it's something he wants to talk about in the interview, in case it's something that maybe he can play that'll give him an upper competitive advantage. Another way to do it, you could integrate it into the professional profile. So I highlighted here where I just kind of worked the words in there. Just kind of slipped them right in there that he's got a 7-year history of outstanding military performance. Somewhere at the end of this resume, I think I did include a few more details, but it really brought it out right up front and became one of the things that was an important selling point for him with the types of positions he was going for. Another way to do it is, as I say, you can create an entirely separate category. So here we've got a category with a heading, military experience. What you want to be careful about, though, is that, and we'll see this in the next slide, you really want to write for the non-military audience. So it's not necessary to really pull out each and every position, each and every deployment, each and every assignment. You can kind of blend these things together. You can pull out the key accomplishments that are related to that. So here's just a strategy for doing that. As I said, you got to be really careful when you're doing military because military people speak their own language and they love acronyms. So as you can see on this one slide, the original resume was just loaded with acronyms and really didn't translate well to anybody who wasn't in the military arena. So not only, all those acronyms, but, advised combatant commands and service components, policy and directives governing information security, that, deconflicting AF request, I remember not even knowing what deconflicting was when I saw that. So if you look at the after, this truly is the same client and doing the same job, but it's translating it into language that you and I and the common person can understand. And I threw in here a good resource for you. This is the glossary of military terms. There's quite a few glossaries online. I did like this one because you can plug in words like deconflicting and find out what that really means. Or, the U.S. CENTCOM, U.S. OCOM, all of that. It'll translate it for you, and it'll help you to write these statements a little bit clearer. Professional affiliations, another one. If you would like to create a category for that, you can. Same question. Is it relevant? Is it current? Does it add value? You have many different ways that you can represent it. You've got things like, activities, professional memberships, trade organizations, civic involvement. I have heard some discussions in our industry that it should never say community service because that means you're a criminal and now you're being court-ordered. Again, this depends on your audience. I lived in Maryland the last 30 years. In Maryland, high school students were required to complete community service or they would not graduate from high school. That has a very different connotation than court-ordered because you committed a crime. So know your client, know his audience, write collaboratively with them, present the information in such a way that it shines a positive light on the client. Things that you might include. You may want to include leadership roles, particularly if they're going for a job that requires leadership skills. You may want to include the dates. You may want to include the locations. So this next slide is an example of a category. This individual had, as you can see, considerable amount of professional affiliations as well as community leadership. So I combined all of those together, created a section for the resume, and listed all of that information. Another option, though, is to do something like the professional addendum, and I couldn't think of a Simpsons character at the time, so I put down Richard Thomas. But if you look at this professional addendum, if a client has a lot of professional affiliations, you may want to just create a separate addendum. And we'll look at that again as I go forward in these slides. Volunteer experience, another optional category. Is it relevant? Is it current? Does it add value? Again, where are you going to include it? How high up on the resume? Separate category, blend it in with something, work it under his education, any number of things. As you're looking at the volunteer experience, things to consider, the name of the organization and the location. If they had a leadership role, you may want to include that. The dates that they were involved, you may want to include that. You might notice if you look at Homer Simpson's resume, at the very bottom is that he earned the Boy Scouts of America Eagle Scout Award. I don't know if any of you have had any experience with the Boy Scouts of America and Eagle Scout, but I don't care how old the client is that I'm working with. If that client earned an Eagle Scout, it is still important to them to put it on the resume. And I've dealt with this so many times over the years that I just don't even argue anymore. I figure out a way to get it on there because apparently to be an Eagle Scout is something you're proud of for the rest of your life. And if you can figure out a way to work it in there, I'd say go ahead and work it in there. Trying to see if they're... Yeah, and I don't have any volunteer on the other ones. Here's an example then. This is from a professional who served on some boards as well as did some consulting and did some volunteer work. So I combined those into a section. In this case, stated the name of the organization, the location, the years, and then a couple of lines about what the person did. Again, it really depends on what is the information that you're trying to communicate to the employer and how relevant is it. If you can build in more keywords by giving descriptions, then give a description. If you can provide more insight about who this client is, then, include that information. These are not hard and fast rules that I'm showing you tonight. They're basic guidelines to pay attention to. Another one is this publications, presentations, and patents. And that's where this Richard Thomas one really comes in handy as an addendum. A lot of times clients have a lot of these things, particularly if they came from the research, academic background, maybe a medical. They may have numerous publications and presentations and patents. The old CV format really focused on a lot of these. Now, rather than continuing your resume on for multiple pages, you may want to create a separate addendum like the one I have for Richard. And when you create that addendum, you're going to use the same letterhead, the same layout, the same font, and then you're going to have a heading on here that identifies that this is the addendum, and then here are the categories that fall under that. Now, publications is a really tricky one because there is a right way to type these. And not always does our client know what the right ways are. So one of the slides I'm going to show you here, before I go on, as you see, I'm mentioning that not only the professional addendum, here's an example where you might want to just work it into the summary. It's just this last line that says, successful in developing patent-approved technology and commercial oil recovery processes, secured 3 company patents. So it's right up there front and center on the resume. And then if there's detail, it can be put in another section or be put on an addendum. This next, you'll see that here's how publications, here's an example of how a publication is written up. To get the proper formatting, and I actually gave you some numbers here from the Gregg Reference Manual. If you find that the client has publications and presentations, go to those pages, those sections of the Gregg Reference Manual, because it really tells where you put the period, when you use quotation marks, when you use italics, when you use parentheses, when you indent, which name appears in first name first, last name first. It's very, very complex. Another resource, and I'm surprised I didn't include it on here, and I can send out this title. If you're not familiar, there's a book called Résumé Magic, written by Susan Britton Wickham. It's like the resume writer's Bible. I have no idea how this woman ever created this. Let me grab this off my shelf here, because I have to tell you, it is 585 pages. So she has a whole chapter on how to format presentations, publications, and patents. So between that and the Gregg Reference Manual, you should be able to do that. And, you know, my sympathy to anyone who runs into it, because it's a very, very tedious process creating these addendums. They're very, very challenging to proofread, too. Okay. The next section that I'm talking about, and I guess I'm kind of running through these fast. I'll do questions at the end. The next section would be awards. Where do you want to include them? Do you want to include them? Are they relevant? Are they current? Do they add value? So here's a couple of options. You can work it into the actual experience section of the resume. So you'll see here, the job title, company name, the dates, the overall responsibilities, and then the awards are called right out. They're called out here at the top because they were really, really strong awards. They may fall somewhere underneath the bulleted accomplishments. Another way you could do it is you could just work them in as an accomplishment bullet. So if you look at the 5th bullet here, it identifies the various awards that this sales rep got while he was working this job. So it becomes another one of his achievements. Another way you could do it is you could actually create another section for awards, commendations, recognitions, whatever you want it to be, and list them all in there. If you're doing it with military, it's often a good idea, well, even with this one, to identify what was it for, if it really adds to the value that the client is presenting. So, maybe it's nice that this guy was Social Worker of the Month, but what did he do to earn it? Or, the Governor's Excellence Award. Can't talk tonight. So, various things to take into consideration. Another thing that's really becoming very, very popular in the modern resume is these testimonials. This is where you grab a quote. It could be a direct quote, something that the client is saying about their philosophy or their business approach. It could be a quote that maybe appeared on a performance review. Maybe they got it through an email message from a coworker, or maybe it was something that came out of their LinkedIn profile. So you can scatter them throughout. This one actually appeared in the summary section underneath that keyword competency list. This next one, it got worked into the experience section. And probably with this one, throughout the experience, there was a quotation in different experience sections about what this person. So he's not only saying, this is what I did, and this was the impact, but this is what other people thought about me. So there's some, good strategies for how you can work that in. It's all about marketing. And testimonials are really, really big with marketing people. So you're creating a marketing document. Work in a testimonial if you can. References, in the old days, we used to have that little line on the bottom that said references available upon request. And in all reality, if you were to say to the client at that very moment, would you please give me the names, addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses of 5 people, they probably would say, well, I don't have that right now, but I can look it up for you. So it's a kind of a no-brainer line. Best practice is leave it off. Put something else on that line that's going to be more relevant. It's not wrong. We wouldn't mark you as that's an error to put it on there, but it's just more effective if you take it off the resume and actually create something like this document for Marge Simpson. Create a document for your client. Use the same letterhead, use the same font, the same layout, the same format, and then type up the information. That way, when an employer requests references, the client can hand it to them. The client can take this with them when they go to a job interview and they're handed an application, and now they have to copy things off of that. The reference list here is not only identifying the people, but explaining what the relationship is. So if the employer is going to call, Joe Smith for reference, they want to know, well, why is Joe Smith? I don't want to ask them about Company X if they didn't even know the client there. So providing this information can be really useful as a separate document. Some writers like to still include it at the bottom of the resume because it's kind of like a way to say the end. No more is coming. The references are available upon request. Going back to the addendum, sometimes I'll see at the bottom of a resume professional addendum available upon request, or a list of patents and publications available upon request, or patents and publications on enclosed addendum. So there are other ways that you can call attention to it without really creating a problem. But again, don't try to squeeze that in if it means you're going to have to drop something else that's more relevant. So I ran through this really fast tonight. And I'm going to unmute the line, and I'm going to see what kinds of questions and comments I have. The good news is this week's homework assignment is nowhere near as time-consuming and tedious. I'll send that out to you as I did last week in individual emails. Hopefully it won't take you anywhere near as long to do. There's just 3 little exercises in there. If you don't understand the instructions, you can always email me or give me a call. Sometimes I don't explain things as well as I think I am. And then next week is probably one of my least favorite, but an essential lesson. We're going to go over the basic grammar basics and the common errors. So that one, hang on to your hat. It's going to be a long ride, and we're going to cover a lot of different things. But they're so essential. So let me unmute the line here. We'll see what kinds of questions we have. I'll start at the bottom and jump around. Sheila, you didn't get on the call yet, did you? Okay, how about Mark? Did you get on yet? Okay, Brenda, you're next then. Comments, questions, situations you've run into.
This is Sheila. I'm here. I'm sorry, I couldn't come off mute before, but
Can we back up Brenda to Sheila again?
Oh, okay.
No, I have no questions.
Yeah, was this Sheila speaking? Has no questions?
That's right.
Okay. Can you share us any examples that you've run into? That's okay. Put you on the spot. It's always hard to be the first one to answer the question. How about you, Brenda? I'm going to go back to you then. Questions, comments, situations you've run into, ideas that I didn't think of.
No, it's been interesting. I had a woman who had moved to the United States from Germany. So she came with a CV.
Right.
To convert that to a resume was quite a challenge because the CV was very, very detailed. Everything she had ever done in life, and she was a very accomplished woman. So that was a big challenge. I kind of enjoyed it, but it was a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm going to divert for a second. You know, on Candace Skinner, did you complete that exercise so that we could see what you might have put in to answer these questions?
Yes, I did. I'm glad you brought that up. Would you all like a copy of what I did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll send that out to you. And it just as an aside, since Brenda brought up Candace, one question I wanted to ask is, does anybody have any thought about why her photo was on there? Did it have any impression on anybody? Why did I put that on there?
Well, people used to do that.
Okay. Did the photo impress anybody in any particular way?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, let me tell you, the reason I put it on there is because I worked with this person virtually, and, I listened to her story. You read her story, drug arrest, time in jail, work in a man's world, auto parts. I had an image in my mind of Candace, just as I'm sure you all do when you're talking to your clients. And when I went to her LinkedIn profile, and that is her, I saw that picture and I went, oh my God, this is not the person I was picturing. And it, in some ways, influenced the way I wanted to present her on the resume. And I think she even said in her profile that her boss made some comment about how she could sell because she'd bring in the female persuasion. And I just thought, that blonde hair and the blue eyes and the red lipstick, it was like, wow, this lady really has got an upper edge in competing in a man's environment and knowing what she's talking about. I don't know. I threw it on there because I was thinking it may influence some minds. But going back to what Brenda said, and I think that was you speaking, Doug, there was a time, and in Europe, a lot of the resumes still have photos on them. Wow. And in Europe, a lot of the countries still request that you put marital status and children.
Yes.
And I remember doing a resume presentation at one of the conferences on international resumes, and there are some European countries that you need to list on your resume the last year you voted in a political election.
Wow.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Because employers would perceive that if you're not voting, you're not a good citizen, and if you're not a good citizen, you're not a good employee.
Wow.
So there's a lot we can learn. Okay. Thank you, Brenda, though, for sharing that experience with a international resume. How about you, Tiffany? Questions, comments, things you've run into?
Well, I did run into a person who couldn't decide which job, and so we ended up separate resumes. But that was very challenging. So I appreciated you making the comment where we should be able to kind of direct it into one direction or the other, because she didn't know herself. So
Made your job harder.
But she either wanted to teach photography or have a job being a photographer, so at least it was the same industry.
Right.
I did have a specific question because I always will, I'm thinking. But with you had said that multiple pages, sometimes one page is good enough. Sometimes multiple pages, but I keep hearing over and over, 2 pages. So how do you? Is it just dependent on like the years the person's been working, what their industry is? Normally 2 pages is plenty. So I was just kind of curious if there's like a loose standard.
It's such a tricky one. I do proofreading for a writer that works almost exclusively with executives, and so many of those resumes are 3 pages long. And then I'm hearing other executive resume writers saying, no, you've got to write tight. It really gets down to know your client, know your audience. And to try to impose a rule across the board is almost like saying, well, all the people reading the resume are going to have the same preferences. And we don't know that. So we've got to know our client. The rule I kind of follow is if you can do it in 1 page and do it effectively, do it in 1 page. If you need to do it in 3, do it in 3. And a lot of it, too, goes back to your formatting. Is it 3 pages long because you had really huge margins, you didn't use incremental spacing, your font was too big? So I just hate talking about the numbers of sheets of paper because we're focusing on the wrong thing then. Right. We have to look at relevancy, value, our target audience, all of those things come into play, and then worry about whether or not it's printing out on 1 sheet of paper or 10.
Okay. Thank you. And then question about the dates, putting the dates on the education or even putting years of experience, if it's, say, like 20 years or more, the issue of ageism. And it can actually work either way. Because if you have a recent graduate, their work experience may not be as much. There could be ageism based on their youth. But I keep running into feedback about not including years of experience when sometimes I feel like it demonstrates a deep knowledge of an industry. And I kind of leave it up to the client how they feel about it. But I'm just curious about what your thoughts are. I've run into people who are like, absolutely never put a date on there and don't put anything over 20 years experience. So
you're never going to hear me do any absolutes other than absolutely it must be grammatically correct and error-free. But the most common answer is it depends. Yeah. And as you said, it can work either way. Think about it. If you were hiring a heart surgeon to replace your heart, would you want to know that they had 20 years of experience? Or would you like to go onto the operator table wondering if they just got out of college? So, we gotta know our audience. We gotta know what's relevant. The other thing you look at is look at some of these job announcements. They will tell you a lot of times how many years are required of experience. So if the job announcements are saying 10 years of experience, then by all means, at least say 10 plus years of experience. Now, do you want to say 36 years of experience? Probably not. But, there are times that I want to emphasize that the client is highly experienced, 20, 25 years. Maybe instead of putting in the number, I'll just write more than 2 decades of experience. That doesn't jump out on the sheet of paper as much as seeing, 25 years or seeing a date that's 1982, which I still can't believe was, 35 years ago. But so it depends. And, whenever somebody gives me one of those hard and fast rules, I just like to say, that's interesting. How do you know that? And throw it back on them. Well, I heard. Oh, okay. Well, now you're going to hear something else.
Well,
don't let people do that.
Of course. Thank you.
You're welcome. Suzanne, I don't think you're with us, are you? Okay. LJ?
I think I'm all good. Really just taking it in and looking at all of the different options. There isn't really one kind of cookie cutter approach. And for somebody well, I tend to be the queen of trying to get it on one page, but the addendum philosophy, that as a strategy, I think feels really smart, and particularly for my client group, whether it's preparing those references up front or really looking at what else could you put on a second page, once you got kind of a foot in the door.
Yeah,
that would be relevant.
We'll move ahead. One of our later lessons is on advanced resume strategies. I'll show you some of the infographic resumes that are now showing up. I don't know if any of you have seen them, but they're these one-page, graphically designed, and they're like, wow. And those might work for your clients, LJ.
Interestingly enough, I did a project in the graphic design space, and all these kids had these infographic resumes, and I cannot tell you how the head of HR hated them because they look really great if you're looking at them on a screen, but God forbid you hit the print button.
Oh, yeah.
They jam your printer, they use up all your ink, they've got black backgrounds, they're just so there's a pitfall in that. I mean, to the point where...
And they'll definitely choke an ATS.
Yeah, so I'll put that in a parking lot for a later conversation.
Good. How about you, Ronnie?
Yeah, right with LJ just said, I'm with her because I have two targeted audiences. In my own business, all I work with are Boeing clients, and that truly is an ATS system. And so those HR reps, all they want is just a certain format. And what I'm writing a resume for is to upload into their profile, into the ATS system. So it's pretty, I have this format that I know that the HR reps are looking for because I work very closely with and I've done that for the last 9 years.
Wow.
And so they do have that system. However, I also work at a community college, and so I'm working often with either life changers, people who have lost their jobs through downsizing, and so they've come back to school. So they have one profession that they've lived for years, and now they're retraining. Or I have many times international students who have come to school, and they're, training in something. Or I have young students who they're graduating, and so they don't really have a lot of education. A lot of work experience. So this is great for me. But it's a different thing. So I like the new format. It's totally new for me. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Well, good. Douglas. Douglas, are you still with us? Oh, somebody's radio's back again.
I muted myself.
That's all right. Thank you.
We want to celebrate with you.
But there's now a radio.
For events to commemorate.
It is your radio, Douglas.
But there's no radio around me.
Visit EDCC.
It's something picking up on your phone that is so bizarre.
That's really weird because I'm now on my third phone because 3 of my phones have gone. Batteries have died. So I think I must be infiltrated. It may be the Russians hacking me.
Oh,
it
no.
could be, or fillings in your teeth are picking up a radio station or something. Did you have any comments or questions?
Anyway, it's gone. I also it's gone now. I also had questions about page length. I've found that keeping it to 2 pages max does impose certain discipline on me as the writer. For my government work, and maybe it was a saying in other professions, but sort of the subordinate comes into the boss and says, "Sorry about the 4-page memo. I didn't have time to write a short one." You're more selective in your wording, and it's just tighter writing, and it's also a nice cop out, if you will, but it's also a nice way to explain to the client, well, we really don't need to include everything you did since kindergarten in this. It's best to keep it to 2 pages.
Yeah, I think the majority of mine are 2 pages. It's kind of becoming more, I think, the common standard. But again, you're going to hear so many different opinions about that. And federal resumes, they kind of go on forever.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at those in one of the future modules too. We'll look at a basic federal resume just so that you can see the difference. Is it relevant? Is it current? Does it add value to the client? That's what it's all about. Okay, and then Christina, yes, Doug.
No, I was just saying good. Looking forward to that.
Oh, okay. Christina, you patiently waited while you listened to all these questions and comments. Now it's your turn.
I think I can relate to a lot of what was said already. I think especially working with a candidate who came from Europe and had just so much excessive information and having to pare that down. I definitely have been through that. I guess the one area I'd want to ask about, and it also relates to someone having several years of experience, but half of it not being relevant to their target job. Does it make sense to have like an early career section where you just kind of list the roles in companies, or does it not even make sense if they're completely irrelevant?
Oh, you're saying the earlier career is irrelevant?
It's like half of it. So let's say they have 18 years of experience, but the first 6 of those years have nothing to do with their target job, and there's not much.
Yeah, then I probably wouldn't include them. And we're going to look at some strategies as we go forward. How do you include older experience? I'll show you some options there. Okay. Sometimes the tricky thing, and I thought that this might be what you were asking me, but you're asking me the opposite. Sometimes the clients come to us, and it's what they're currently doing that's not relevant. They want to go back and do something that they used to do that was relevant. So then you got that challenge you have to deal with. As you can see, if there was a cookie cutter approach, it would be nice. And I guess Microsoft thought when they created a template, it was going to make it easy for everybody to fill it in. But that's why our clients need us, and that's what we want to communicate to them is we're charging what we charge because we're not creating cookie cutters. We're marketing people, and we're developing a marketing document and campaign that is unique to them. And there is no 2 resumes that are alike, except for if you're Ronnie and you're writing them for Boeing, in which case, and there are some organizations that are like that. We want all our resumes to look exactly like this. Then, that's what you give them. Recruiters might do that. They may say, I want all of my candidate resumes to look like this. So you give them that. But it never becomes a hard and fast rule. There's, as I say, the only hard and fast rule is it's got to be accurate, honest, grammatically correct, and error-free. That's it. Anything else you do, there's all kinds of leeway. And anybody that'll tell you, you should never, just ask them. Where did you hear that? And explain to me why you should never do that. And then see what they say. I'm going to turn all of you into a bunch of cocky resume writers. So I think that is a wrap for tonight. We're a couple of minutes over. I'm going to spend this week trying to figure out how to get my screens to work right. I will send out the keyword summary sheet that I showed you tonight with the book on it, so you'll have that. I'll send you the highlighted profile, so you have that. I'm saying these so I'll remember. I'll send you what I put together for the homework assignment, and then you'll also get a separate email with next week's homework assignment. And then I'll send another email, and I apologize, but I hate blending a lot of subjects into one email message. So the third email I'll send you is some dates and times that we can do the DISC assessment. I hope you all get a chance to take it. It won't take you any more than 10 minutes to complete it. And I'll be real excited to hear what you all have done. So great I appreciate all your time tonight. Have an awesome weekend, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.